Hello, North Central Washington, and welcome to Networked. I'm your host, Jenny Rojanasatian, and today I'm thrilled to share some of the big highlights from the 2022 Flywheel Investment Conference. Presented by sponsors Moss Adams, Ogden Murphy Wallace, Confluence Health, and Microsoft, the Flywheel Investment Conference is Washington's meeting place for entrepreneurs and investors. Held annually right here in Wenatchee, the Flywheel Conference provides a place where startups, investors, and business leaders can meet, connect, and compete. At the heart of the conference is our investment competition, where companies go head-to-head for real investment dollars awarded by the Flywheel Angel network. This year's conference was our biggest event yet, with 2 sold-out days, a dynamic lineup of speakers, and over 10 companies competing for over $325,000 on the table. We're going to be doing several recap episodes. This is just part 1, where you'll have a chance to hear from some of the founders who were competing this year. You'll also get to hear from our special keynote speakers and sponsors. I hope you enjoy learning more about these diverse companies, their missions, and also learn some new information from some of the many exciting speakers we had. Don't go far. We're going to have one of our finalist presentations right here after the commercial break. Welcome back to Networked. We're about ready to watch some of the recap footage from the Flywheel Investment Conference. Up first, you're going to hear from BrainSpace. They were one of the 10 finalists competing for $325,000 at the Flywheel Conference in Wenatchee. Listen now to the pitch by Caitlin Morse.
Hi there, good afternoon. So my co-founder and I used to run a medical device consultancy, and let me tell you, there are no shortage of problems to solve in healthcare. As our reputation grew, we had doctors who came to us with possible problems. But just because there's a problem doesn't mean there's a business. We've advised PhDs and industry engineers who came up with creative solutions, but just because there's a possible solution doesn't mean there's a business. We've had clients who secured millions in grant funding, had really cool science, but they didn't have a business. So when my co-founder came to me with an idea to manage brain pressure and reduce disability, I was skeptical. He'd had a friend who had had 19 brain surgeries by her 30th birthday. Of course we wanted to help. I had a friend whose dad had died of a hemorrhagic stroke. These are some of the many complications of brain damage that can be caused by excessive pressure on the brain. So we appear to have a problem, we appear to have a possible solution, but I wasn't yet convinced we had a business, at least not one worth shutting down our thriving consulting firm for. So I dug in. I started with the medical literature, and what I found was that even the experts were not in agreement over how brain pressure should be managed in those first few days in the ICU because they lacked clear data. I talked with the bedside ICU nurses who were responsible for these patients, and what I found was so shocking, I had to bring you a picture. This is how top hospitals today manage brain pressure. The same string-level bass strain they've been using since 1927. Now, this means that the patient must stay completely lined up between their ear and the IV pole, meaning that even a change of a few inches can result in overdrainage. This makes it high risk and labor-intensive, requiring expert nurses, a 1-to-1 nursing ratio, and taking up ICU beds. So we said, okay, that's enough of a problem. We're going to work on evaluating the solution next. So this is our proof of concept prototype built in our wet lab, tested for 90 days. That wet lab is actually our guest bathroom. Thank you, COVID. And what we found was that it only needs to work for 7 to 14 days. It went 90 days flawlessly. Said, okay, time to keep going. So next we looked at the market. And we found that it wasn't just neurotrauma. We also had a case of 2 million Americans with a reversible form of dementia called NPH. Right now, only 5% of those are getting diagnosed and getting the surgical care they need. So the idea of 2 million families getting their loved one back, I had experienced that. I had a close friend who had died following a long period of dementia. And the ability to give those families their loved ones back was staggering and motivating. In talking with clinical experts, we also found there was a third segment to this market, and that's surgical recovery. So these are cases of spinal cord surgeries, brain tumor removals, again, needing to manage pressure in that acute setting. So what we had here was an almost $1 billion beachhead market of customers that are all in the neuro ICU today, and that all are paying for this string level based system. So we have an opportunity to improve that from the market standpoint. So next, what we looked at was margins. So I have actually previously worked for a Fortune 500 where I was responsible for evaluating about 200 products a year to say, what's it going to take to bring these into the market, working with early stage startups all the way through to the biggest names in medical. And that included doing the diligence on M&A deals for these big strategic partners. And let me tell you, margins matter. So my co-founder leveraged his expertise in manufacturability and design for cost effectiveness, and we were able to develop a disposable portion that has 90% margin recurring revenue. Okay, that I can work with. So at this point, we now have problem, solution, impact, market, and margin. We have a venture-backed, backable company. It's time to start building some traction. So we closed down the consultancy. We launched BrainSpace full-time in January of 2021 with our proof of concept that we had here, the benchtop system. By June, we had developed a commercial prototype that works and behaves just like the system that would be used in the market. If we were consumer, we would sell that, but we're medical, so we got a few more steps to go. And then we started putting that into the hands of doctors and nurses. And their excitement and passion for how this would solve problems they had is really what motivated us to keep going. We've now talked to more than 200 of them across more than 100 institutions, so we really understand what those clinical workflows look like across a variety of systems. I also went out and recruited expert advisors. These three represent the key primary user groups within the hospital. So the neurointensivist is the doctor who manages the ICU, the neuro ICU nurse is the bedside care of the patient, and the neurosurgeon is responsible for putting in the drain and for making those surgical decisions moving forward. So all three of these are partnering with us, working with us every month on not only developing the value proposition for each of these stakeholders, but we also have an IRB-backed study on nursing utilization that will get published just before launch. I am also excited to announce, first here today, you're the first ones to hear this public announcement, that we are bringing on a new clinical advisor. Dr. Michael Apcon started out as a pediatric intensivist, managing children with the very string-level system we're talking about. He then moved into a role where he was doing quality improvements and hospital administration, and most recently has been the CEO of two of the top hospitals in the world, Sick Kids in Toronto, which is the #1 children's hospital, and Tufts in Boston, which is also responsible for a number of the academic innovations that you've seen over the last decade. So bringing him on board is a very exciting piece of progress that we've welcomed him last week, and he's going to be working with us again, weekly meetings, monthly interaction. This is not just a face on a slide. So when we look at what go-to-market looks like, obviously long-term we expect to be able to impact patient outcomes, but we don't have to wait for that. And this is part of what also makes this exciting as a business. We can actually start today by freeing up ICU beds. So I don't know how many of you are aware, during COVID, there would be times when all elective surgeries would get canceled, including things like cancer biopsies that really don't feel elective, right? That was because you need a free ICU bed to do a major surgery. So by automating this process, by making it easier to manage, we're freeing up that capability so more surgeries can take place, people can be treated in their local community, and that's the benefit today while we build the data showing that we also improve patient outcomes. So we have a solution that's better for patients, simpler for nurses, and is also building clean, continuous data sets that allow for machine learning-based advances in research. But we're not stopping there. We actually have a number of other products in the pipeline. So our first patent, which we expect to be getting issued soon, will cover not only the brain and spine cases I've told you about today, but also invasive blood pressure monitoring and abdominal pressure monitoring, both of which are critical for the ICU. Our second, third, and fourth patents are related to the analysis of the fluid that's being removed, allowing for what is currently being done at a lab-based center to be done at the bedside. This is not only important for patients, but also for a number of research applications, and we've got a number of academic partners really excited about that potential. And all of this is possible because of the team we have. We have an experienced team who has taken dozens of products through this process. My co-founder and I have been working together for the last 8 years across 3 companies, so we were able to bring our complementary skill set and have a very cost-effective, careful approach so far. We have built a team now with people coming in that same expertise, and we're ready to go. So there are a number of companies out there, a number of problems getting solved. There are not very many like BrainSpace, with a compelling value proposition, a capital-efficient approach, a strong founding team, and a big vision for a highly profitable and highly meaningful business. And that's one worth building. Thank you.
Welcome back from our commercial break. I hope you enjoyed that presentation by BrainSpace, a really exciting Washington State company. Now we're going to hear from two of our special guests at the Flywheel Conference. Matt Adamczyk from Microsoft, who will share about Titletown Tech in Wisconsin, and then you'll hear from Catherine Sizoff of Strela Biotechnology. Catherine was not a finalist this year. She was not competing for the investment awards, but rather sharing about her really exciting, innovative company and all the success she's built in the recent years. Enjoy these presentations.
Well, thanks to the team for having me and giving me a few minutes to show off some of the work that we're doing with Microsoft TechSpark, which is based across the US in 10 different communities, including Central Washington. So the most improbable team in sports, the Green Bay Packers have had this designation given to them as being the only community-owned professional sports team. In the smallest market of all of professional sports, Green Bay, a town of 100,000 people, has an NFL team nestled right in the middle of what would appear to be a tiny suburb. Fast forward 100 years, and something else improbable happened, an improbable partnership. So there on the screen is Mark Murphy, the president of the Packers, and Brad Smith, who I work for at Microsoft, and he's the president and vice chair of our company. They each had a vision about 5 years ago focused on how do we invest in our community? How do we invest in Green Bay from the Packers' perspective to make sure that while a football team put them on the map, that we could build something that would keep Green Bay relevant and keep Green Bay on the map. And Brad Smith is looking at, we've brought a lot of technology into this world, and we've created a lot of innovation on the coast, but how do we make more equitable access to that innovation? How do we invest in the places that don't have the same tech innovation occurring as Silicon Valley or New York City, for example? And thus, Titletown Tech was born. As you heard, we have the designation of Titletown due to the 13 world championships that the Green Bay Packers have won in their 103-year history. But now we're trying to win new championships in the companies that we're investing in. At Titletown Tech, we're at the tail end of our first fund that was $25 million, in which we made 23 investments, and we'll be announcing our second fund later this year. So if you're an entrepreneur in the audience, looking for funding, reach out. We look at everything that comes across our desk. And while we invest in a lot of companies that are Wisconsin-based or have Wisconsin ties, we're not exclusive to Wisconsin. And so we look nationwide and look for things that connect into our unique ecosystem. And for those of you that Titletown Tech itself might not be a great fit, I also want to plug Microsoft for Startups. We have a suite of resources that are available to any startup building a tech-based business, whether that's access to Azure credits, access to Microsoft technology. You can go to the link here, startups.microsoft.com, and access all of those resources. All you need is a LinkedIn account, and you can get your company going on Microsoft technologies.
Hello, my name is Catherine. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Strela. We are a venture-backed Series A company that has raised about $11.5 million to date from investors like Mark Cuban, Google Ventures, and Yamaha. 1/3 of all food is wasted before it's consumed. And I'll throw an even crazier stat out there, which is that the carbon emissions on food waste are greater than that of all US transportation combined. And this isn't for lack of trying. This is because food supply chains aren't designed for food. And the way that this manifests itself is in 2 ways specifically. The first one is there's a lack of data, especially quantifiable data, about the qualities and parameters of perishable products. And the second one is that that information, even if it does exist, is siloed amongst a certain player in that supply chain. So for example, a grower knows a lot about the crop that they've produced, but that information never gets passed down to the retailer. So as a result, you have a ton of food waste. We think that the way to solve this problem is to create quantifiable data and then use that information to connect players within the supply chain. And the way that we look at the supply chain is a very simplified, 3 segments. The first one is growers and packers and suppliers. So these are the guys that are responsible for growing and nurturing the product. The second group is the importers and distributors. So they're responsible for handling the product and making sure it gets to the right place at the right time. And finally, you've got the retailer, who's in charge of making sure that we as consumers have a bunch of amazing food options every single day. We take it for granted that we can walk into a grocery store at any point and see avocados, bananas, kiwis, mangoes, persimmons every single day, all year round. We think that produce is the starting point into addressing this problem. And this is because upwards of 50% of certain produce items can be wasted before they ever reach the consumer. But on top of that, it presents a huge top-line opportunity as well. 92% of consumers pick their grocery store based on the quality of produce that it provides. I know that I shop at the grocery store that's got the best avocados. And on top of that, produce also increases the total shopping cart size. So there's an average 28% basket size increase every time produce is purchased. In order to solve this problem, we have created a technology that predicts the maturity of produce. And we couple this technology with software to help our customers make actionable decisions about what to do with their produce in the supply chain. The core behind our technology is a sensor that can measure the communications between produce, specifically through gas. So you've probably seen an unripe banana. When you put an unripe banana next to a ripe one, you see that it ripens a lot faster than if it was by itself. Or you've heard the term, one bad apple spoils the bunch. This is because produce, when they're ripening, are communicating with each other using gases. And so we've created a sensor that can intercept those gases and kind of hear what the fruit is saying. And then we turn that into an actionable decision for our customer. What's really cool is that the produce is talking to each other before a lot of other physiological changes are happening. So prior to a starch change or a sugar or pressure change, produce is talking to its counterparts, and we intercept those communications. So this core sensor technology alongside software presents a lot of potential market opportunities in the supply chain. We actually grew up here in Wenatchee and Yakima, working with apple and pear packers. It's probably no surprise to you guys, being local, that an apple in a grocery store can be over a year old. And this is because it's stored in storage rooms at a packing facility. So a typical packer has a few dozen storage rooms. Each one is filled with millions of apples. And the packer is playing a little bit of a game show game of behind which door is the most mature product. They can't pop open that door because the room inside is deoxygenated, and opening that room is going to awaken the fruit from its hibernating state. So they rely on 2 specific pieces of information. The first one is historical knowledge, like, I know Farmer Joe's got really good Granny Smith apples, and so I'm going to trust them to have better quality produce than somebody else. And the second piece of information is statistically insignificant sampling of the fruit in that room. But ultimately, while the packer does an incredible job, given the information that they have, there's still a lot of waste in that system. So what we do is we put a sensor inside that storage room and we monitor it as it's ripening. And we can tell the packer a few months in advance that the fruit is going to mature before it actually does so. We work with a number of customers, the majority of packers out here in Wenatchee, and we've monitored over 2 billion pieces of fruit in apple and pear packing houses to date. There are 2 additional market opportunities that we are looking into as well. The first one is on the import side. So putting our sensor in a mobile version onto a shipping container of fruit and working with it as it travels overseas. So for example, we work with kiwis. Kiwis travel from Australia and New Zealand to the United States, and it takes sometimes up to 120 days for them to get there. And so we put a sensor on that shipping container, we monitor the produce as it travels, and we can help an importer at port make that split-second decision about what do I send to Costco, what do I send to Walmart, what do I keep in storage. And we're also working with retailers. So retailers receive produce at the very end of the supply chain, right when it's about to perish, and they're kind of playing a game of hot potato. On top of that, retailers aren't experts in apples, they're not experts in kiwis. They're managing hundreds of thousands of pieces of inventory, and perishable products is just one of them. So the way that they currently work is they operate on a FIFO system, first in, first out, meaning that the first truck of avocados into a distribution center is the first truck that gets sent to the grocery store without really factoring maturity whatsoever, which is why every time I go to the grocery store, the avocados are like kind of way too hard or way too mushy. And so what we do is we use our sensor technology to grab a picture of maturity of the produce as it arrives to the retailer. And we work with the retailer and the supplier to feed that information into their inventory systems so that they can reorganize and reshuffle their inventory based on maturity, so that they're always sending the most mature product to the store shelf first. And we found that in doing this, we have some pretty crazy results. We've worked with major retailers and shown that simply by reshuffling their inventory, not changing anything operational, being just a little API or webhook that plugs into their existing inventory management software, we can reduce the amount of in-store shrink by up to 50%. Huge impact on the bottom line. But on top of that, we're also able to improve the customer experience. So we're able to reduce the amount of mealy apples on the shelf by about 5 times. Every time you bite into an apple that's kind of gross, you don't go back and repurchase it for an average of 5 weeks, and we're able to reduce that instance very significantly. We're excited about a lot of potential opportunities in the future. One thing I'll talk about is e-commerce. So we don't always trust some stranger to pick out that perfect avocado for us, but we think that Strella can be used to power that decision making so that we can be more comfortable when we shop online. We're a team of about 15. We're located here, Seattle, and Philadelphia. A team of scientists, engineers, basically every kind of scientist you can think of, electrochemistry, molecular biology, and coupled with a bunch of awesome people on the ground helping us and supporting us. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a wrap on our recap, episode 1 of the Flywheel Investment Conference. Here's the good news. We still have 3 more episodes to go. There was so much content this year that we had to provide an opportunity to our NCW Life viewers to watch all of the excitement of the Flywheel Conference. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next week for part 2.
Since 1999, NCW Tech Alliance has served as our regional hub for technology innovation. As a 501c3, their nonprofit mission is to connect people and technology resources to create a thriving community. You can network with the team and guests from today's show by visiting them at www.ncwtech.org.